Hello, welcome to the Sunoikisis Spring 2025 session 3, working with Egyptian texts. We're here today on March 18th, 2025, so we're actually recording this 8th in the sequence. Today we're going to be introducing some digital tools for reading and analysing ancient Egyptian texts. And there's a link to the GitHub page below the video with the slides and all the links that we've talked about in the video. Hello to everybody watching us live. Do say hello in the chat where you're watching from, and hello to everybody watching after the recording as well. Today we're joined by Franziska Naether from Leipzig and Eliese-Sophia Lincke from FU Berlin. So two Egyptologists who are here to contribute to this session. If you do have any questions, please do put those in the chat for the discussion at the end. So now I'm going to hand over to Franziska to start the session.
Thank you very much, Katie, and also thank you very much, Monica. Today it will be me again, and I have brought you someone that you don't know before if you have watched one of my classes, Eliese-Sophia Lincke. She is Professor of Egyptology and Digital Humanities in Berlin, and we have a couple of exciting things for you in store. And without further ado, I am switching to our agenda for today because we have quite something on the plate. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to this class and also talk you a little through the resources that we have provided on the GitHub page, but stay tuned, there's a little bit more. And also we will quickly discuss a couple of aspects that came up in the required readings that we put for you also as well on the GitHub page. And then you can sit back and relax a little when Eliese will introduce you in a quick way to ancient Egyptian languages and scripts, and also talk about the current state of the art of the Unicode development for ancient Egyptian. Those of you who have seen videos about Egyptology and Sunoikisis before might remember that we've touched upon this issue earlier on, and as you can imagine, there's been new developments. And then we have for you in store the new TLA, the full text database of ancient Egyptian sources, the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae. And we will go and have a live demo with that and enrich this a little bit with new tools, digital humanities tools for reading and deciphering and editing texts in the ancient Egyptian language and script of Demotic. And then at the end, something you will be familiar with maybe if you've seen something of us before, the Rosetta Stone and digital editions of Egyptian texts. And as a little bonus, we will look into large language models and Egyptian and see if these AI tools out there can actually speak right in hieroglyphs. And at the end, we will, of course, discuss something and have a look at the exercises. So that's what we have in store for you today. This is our outline for this session. I'm skipping this because this is what's already known. And we had two required readings for this session. One article, which is in terms of digital classics, digital humanities, already quite old, from 2015 from Serge Rosmorduc. And this is something that Eliese is going to comment on in a bit, and another article by Willeke Wendrich about ethics of digital representation. So those were the readings, and we'll speak a little bit about this in a few minutes. And we also had a lot of further readings for you in store, and we've also updated this a little bit. Also about topics that we don't cover in this session, for instance, about virtual and augmented reality and Egyptology, 3D models, and putting 3D models into 3D context. If you are interested in these topics, there is a lot of links for you on this slide and also in the GitHub page as well. And of course, as always, we are going to share the slides at the end. What we also have for you is an updated link list with tools. And the ones that you can see here on this slide having a little star, an asterisk on the back, is something that we're going to be commenting on in this session in a few minutes. Everything else you're free to explore. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to contact us also after the session. And feel free to reach out in case of questions. So there's a couple of things that Egyptologists are working with. There's full text databases. The first one, of course, is the most important one, the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae, that we're going to cover in detail later on today. But there's also a couple more sources. We look at the 2 Rosetta Stone project that we've been heading, and there is a couple of more tools that are specific for a stage of the Egyptian language. And if you don't know what stages of languages are, stay tuned. We will explain about this in a little, but just to be a bit more precise here, Egyptology and Egyptian language is there for many, many millennia. And of course, you have to specialize in different phases of those languages. And there is also different tools and projects for these phases. I want to single out one here called the AkuPal project. That's the last link on the left-hand column of this slide. This is a project dealing with hieratic. This is one script of ancient Egyptian, and the colleagues who work in this within the context of a big academy project in Germany, they are using, for instance, social network analysis to do clustering of different forms of Egyptian writings of the signs. So quite exciting research. And there is projects for this and that. And then we also do have on the second part of the slide a column with sources for later Egyptian. We will look, for instance, in the Demotic Paleographical Database project today, and others that you might have heard in Suneukisis before, such as papyri.info or the Coptic Scriptorium are mentioned here as well, because we wanted to be quite inclusive here. And there's also more tools. We don't have to mention Trismegistus at this point, because it's quite a famous tool in Suneukisis, and everybody who hasn't heard about that, go there and check it out. Something nice that is also very helpful is the so-called Egyptological Museum Search. This is a webpage that Alexander Ilin-Tomic compiled in order to search for museum entries of objects according to their inventory numbers. This is quite a helpful tool and quite new. That's why I'm mentioning it here. I'm not going through all of it. Right. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Eliese to cover a couple of aspects of the first article that we have assigned you for reading.
Yes, thank you, Franziska. Just leave your screen shared. I will use your slides. So the first reading, as Franziska said, was by Serge Rosmaux-Duc from 2015. And that is, so it's almost 10 years old, or soon 10 years old. And you can see that, but it is still, there's not much overview papers for digital or computational Egyptology. So this is still kind of a go-to thing, also because it's published in the UCLA Encyclopedia of Egyptology. And it's very interesting to revisit that paper 10 years later and see what has happened in the meantime. So on the left side, you see things that we found are important and discussed in that paper. And on the right side, you have some comments also showing the later developments. So Serge in his paper says that he is dealing with computational linguistics in Egyptology, and that is also called natural language processing. In the meantime, people who do that have started calling it ancient language processing, just to make clear that it is different from natural language processing because our material is so much more complex, starting with the non-Latin writing system and with the fact that we always have 2 layers of representation for the original language, namely the original writing system, if we are able to encode it in a computer. We will talk about that later. And in a second layer, the transliteration or transcription. And that alone is not possible with most natural language processing tools that we could take off the shelf that have been developed for modern languages. Then he points out that there actually is a long tradition of doing Egyptology with computers, and he names Wolfgang Schenkel and his Coffin Text project, and Jan Boerman with Glyph, which became Glyph for Windows, or WinGlyph as we usually call it. And they started very early. So Wolfgang Schenkel started in the late 60s, and his data is now at the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae and will be made available soon for the public. They are very complex encoding on all layers, like hieroglyphic, sign function encoding up to syntax. It's really nice. We are happy to have that. It's a real treasure. I would like to add, because Serge in his paper is only speaking about Egyptology and not Coptology, that for Coptic there was a pioneer like that too. Wolf-Peter Funk started in the 80s to compile an electronic corpus of Coptic text, which will also be integrated within the next years into the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae. And then Serge mentions that there are two ways to do digital Egyptology. One is to convert, to transfer the traditional practices of Egyptology into the digital sphere, like, for instance, annotation or comparing of variants, and to use the possibilities, the searchability, the filtering, the sorting, and so on. And the other one is things that you couldn't do before, types of information extraction, automation of certain tedious tasks. I will come back to that at the end. And he mentions how important the annotation schemes are that have been developed and that needed to be adapted for Egyptian text. So TEI, the Text Encoding Initiative, or EPIDOC from the world of XML. And then the, I think, most outdated part of the paper concerns text representation and especially encoding. We will talk about that a bit later, but much has happened there. So in this paper, Serge points out what is possible and what is not yet possible. And 10 years ago, many things in Unicode, especially when it comes to the encoding of hieroglyphs, had not yet been possible. And now they are. And he also deplores that there is a lack of documentation of the sign inventories on which a Unicode proposal could be based. And that has also changed because we have the Todd sign list now. We have the already mentioned ARCU-PAL project and the Demotic paleographical database project. So we are now creating these resources. And he names the text databases, first and foremost, the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae and the Ramses project that provide the possibilities through web interfaces for searches, and they provide metadata and annotations. Now there's even tree banking data available and further tools. And he says what has been done, especially the tries that have been made for automatic text classification and lexicostatistics, and also clustering according to language stages or finer dating-related issues. And he furthermore mentions that access to the data is usually only possible through web interfaces, which is what the normal user wants. But any data literate person wants data publications, wants the raw data as a data dump on Zenodo or in a repository. And that has also changed because at least the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae has been publishing such a data dump and also smaller data sets on Hugging Face, for instance. So if you work in the sphere, you can go there and download the data and play with it. And then I would like to come back to the automation that Serge has mentioned. So automation means that you try to make the computer do the things that are tedious and boring. For instance, typing text. So optical character recognition and also annotation of text, lemmatization, part of speech tagging, and so on. And transliterating text from hieroglyphs have been tried and more or less successfully. So the results are still not extremely good, but there's hope that this will come in the future. And with the current machine learning revolution, many people have tackled this, myself included. So you will hear a bit more about that as well. Yeah, so that's it for this part.
Thank you, Eliese. And then we have a quick look into the second publication by Willeke Wendrich, which is not almost 10 years, but 2 years old currently. And she is addressing a couple of ethical concerns in Egyptology. And what I have put as bullet points on this slide are actually aspects that could be the same if we would be today in a seminar about current political history or dealing with social media data of living people, because many of the ethical concerns that we have and also the principles that we should stand for in science, such as open science, open access to research data, thinking about our biases and being sustainable in everything that we do, is something that is not just prone to Egyptology, but to academia in general. And what she is commenting on and enriching with Egyptological projects and data is something that was also a good introduction for myself again in revisiting her paper, the so-called London Charter for Computer-Based Visualization of Cultural Heritage. And that is also her background. She's not just commenting on Egyptological data as text data, that will be our focus for today and also of this semester of Sunoikisis, but she's also commenting on material culture, including 3D data in this article. And this is what makes it also quite interesting and applicable for also other fields. I would like to mention briefly the FAIR principles, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and also CARE, which is the CARE principles are sometimes much more complicated to be applied to research data sets, because they involve also being ethically concerned and aware with dealing with indigenous sources and so on. And in the case of Egyptology, this is when it comes to human remains, for instance, or how to deal with people who might be more than 2,000 years dead, but we still think in ethical concerns of these people, in concerns of piety and so on and so on. And this is, of course, something that is also prone to discussions and current debates. Something else that is a question of Egyptology is that Arabic is not yet an official language. So usually there's a huge Eurocentristic or Northern Hemisphere view on Egypt. Arabic is not a prominent language, so to say. This is changing now. We have more and more papers, at least, and publishers offering Arabic translations or at least abstracts, but the field still is very Eurocentric. And as in many other fields, the language of research is shifting more and more towards English, even in countries with languages such as, for instance, with the case of Dutch is a very interesting case, and also with German, because more and more people are publishing in English for various reasons that I'm not going to discuss here. But in the country, in Egypt itself, where Arabic is the main language, this is still, of course, an issue and has elements of gatekeeping, of course. This is the point that Lincke made in her paper, as well as the issues of digital colonization and the male gaze inflicted on objects and so on, and biases that might result from research that we do and the sources that we have, especially when it comes to a topic that Lincke didn't discuss, because 2023, and this is one topic I'd like to introduce here. This is the case of the large language models and the AI tools, where we do have, of course, these gender biases, language biases, and so on. And I also would like the aspect of ecological and aspects and digital vulnerability, because not for everything you need to ask a large language model in general. Right. One final aspect that I'd like to mention here is that of uncertainty. We are dealing, as in many historical disciplines, with a lot of ambiguous and uncertain facts, with papyri that have holes, lacuna, where we can't read the full name of a person, where we can't actually come up with proper metadata, so to say. And I'm also taking out another aspect, standardization. In text-based science, we're actually quite well developed in digital humanities fields, dealing with the correct file formats and what kind of metadata we want to have. In fields dealing with or in the material culture, especially dealing with 3D data, this is still very much in progress and a development for the next years, a very important development for the next years to come. Yeah, and with this, I stop my screen sharing and hand over to Eliese for our next point.
Sorry, I switched the screen window, but forgot to unmute myself. Yeah, so the next point is a very rough, very short introduction to ancient Egyptian languages and scripts. Don't worry, you will not have to learn how to read hieroglyphs here. It's just to give you the overview and the terminology that we are going to refer to in the following as well. So the Egyptian language is divided into two major phases with subphases each. And the two major phases are earlier Egyptian and later Egyptian. Before earlier Egyptian, you have like the early writing, where you can argue whether it's already actual writing or maybe another kind of graphing system that is narrowing in on representing spoken language, but not quite there yet. And then in earlier Egyptian, you have the two subphases, Old Egyptian, that's the language of the Pyramid Age, and Middle Egyptian of the classic Middle Kingdom. And in later Egyptian, you have Late Egyptian, that is the language that seems to more or less suddenly pop up during the Amarna period. Then Demotic, the language of the first millennium BC, and Coptic, the language of the Christian phase that then slowly fades out, and Egyptian, you may know that, dies out as a spoken language. And today the Bohairic dialect of Coptic still serves as the liturgical language in the Coptic Orthodox Church. And the scripts, well, that is quite a list too, because of course Egypt is famous for the hieroglyphs, so the monumental writing system that is used on stone monuments. There is a sub-variety of this, the Ptolemaic hieroglyphs that have a very different sign inventory. Then we have the cursive writing that is mostly used on ostraka and on papyrus, called hieratic. There is also a variant called abnormal hieratic, for which I do not have an image here. Then we have Demotic, the even more cursive script that Franziska can talk much more about than I can. And Coptic, which is a Greek-based alphabet with supplemental characters for the sounds that Greek cannot represent, and that have been with characters that have been loaned from the Demotic script. So that is the rough sketch, and here you can see it on a timeline. And what you can see is that one language stage doesn't come alone usually. So you have major periods with an overlap. It has been called a diglossia situation, so that you have two languages or two language stages at the same time, used in different in different parts of the society, in different genres, in different speech registers. And when Greek comes in, the situation gets even more complex, and we even have a phase where, well, Greek, Arabic, and Coptic are getting entangled until, well, in the end, you know that Arabic supersedes Greek and Egyptian. Both of them basically disappear, except for the liturgical language of the Coptic Church, as I mentioned. So yes, it is a complex situation, but that will not hinder us to talk about our topic of today. So I said that Serge Rosmaux-Duc's paper was a bit outdated when it comes to the encoding of Egyptian scripts. So, but you will still meet the older standards, or what I call here the former standards, which for the transliteration that Egyptologists use was the manuel de codage. And that was developed as an encoding system for the Egyptological transliteration on ASCII keyboards. And you can see what that looks like. I hope it's not too small on the screen. So in the Egyptological transliteration, we have some characters that are not represented in ASCII, like this one, the Aleph, and you would encode it as a capital letter A. Or this one that looks like a little C hook above the line, the Ein, which is encoded by a lowercase letter A. So you could use a normal ASCII keyboard to enter these transliteration signs, and you would have special fonts like transliteration or Umschrift TTN that would render these and make them look like Egyptological transliteration. Of course, the computer would still know that for the computer it would still be Latin. And it couldn't tell the difference between a capital A in a German word or in an English word and in an Egyptian word. So the new standard is to use Unicode instead, so that these characters are fully machine readable and that the computer can make a distinction and knows that this Aleph character, and this is the representation in hieroglyphs here, that the Aleph is actually its own character and not a capital Latin A. And there are several fonts that can display all characters that we need for representing this Egyptological transliteration. And you see a list here. And there are also keyboard layouts so that you can type them directly and don't have to select them from a list or copy paste them. And you find an overview on one of the websites of the project that outputs the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae. And 1.5 years ago at the International Congress of Egyptologists in Leiden, there was a session where Egyptologists in the room agreed on a unified transliteration that should be used for digital text encoding so that all Egyptologists use the same transliteration system when digitizing their text, hoping to boost interchangeability and interoperability. By doing so. There were compromises. Yeah, not everyone is happy with every decision made, but you have to agree on a standard, of course. And you find the link to the website of the International Association of Egyptologists that tries to promote this decision. But what about the hieroglyphs? Now, Fran, I don't know if you want to take back the mic to talk about JSESH or if I should.
I can briefly do that. We also had that in one of the former Sunoikisis sessions. Usually people are typing hieroglyphs and then they end up with little graphic files that they paste into documents such as in Word or OnlyOffice or elsewhere. And the most common tool for that is called JSESH. It's also developed by Serge Rosmodic, whom we've encountered in the reading so far. And we've been covering that also in earlier sessions of Sunoikisis, if you're keen. And you also have on this slide all the links. But of course, it's much better to use the Unicode standards. And with that, I hand back to Eliese.
Yes, because JSESH is great, but it produces image files. So for a computer, it's an image file. It's not a readable text. So what we want is we want to encode hieroglyphs and let the computer know. So make it machine readable and machine actionable. And we want the computer to know that this is Egyptian hieroglyphs. And for this, we need Unicode. And there was an initiative, a mix of people coming from a technical background, font developers and computer scientists and Egyptologists who developed a proposal. And while the so-called Gardner list, that is our basic sign list, the characters that you learn in the first 1 or 2 years when you study Egyptology, those had been entered into the Unicode quite early, I think in the early 2000s, 2005 or something like that. But that's not enough. So that sign inventory is too small. And also what is very important for Egyptologists is that hieroglyphs can be arranged in these square shapes. You see an example here. That is a complex example. It doesn't have to be so complex, but it can be so complex. So you see that several signs are arranged in smaller groups and then set in relation with other signs. And that was not possible in Unicode because Unicode says that writing is a sequence of characters one after the other. And Egyptologists say, well, but not for Egyptian. And I think also for Maya, that's not true. So there was a proposal, and you know, it's a process. You have to convince the Unicode consortium. And they did, because 2 years ago with Unicode version 15, the necessary control characters to encode also this spatial arrangement into squares was actually entered into Unicode and is now usable. So that means that we have Unicode characters, and you see the number here in the middle in the column character sequence respectively, and they are marked here as light blue squares. It is so these are these control characters that tell you about the arrangement. And this is what it looks like. When you do that on your computer with a standard font, your computer will choose a font that can display hieroglyphs. However, there was no font that could also display this arrangement, so the spatial configuration in the proper sense. So it was possible to encode it, but it didn't look the way that it should. And that also changed last year, I think, when Andrew Glass, who works for Microsoft, developed a font that can actually arrange the hieroglyphs following this encoding. So this is a screenshot only, so you cannot copy paste that, because it only works when you have the right font installed on your computer, and I have linked to it here. And that solves the problem of the spatial arrangement that is important, for instance, for dating texts, and we need that information when we encode hieroglyphs. And what is also possible is some philological markup, namely shading hieroglyphs when they are damaged. So not fully destroyed, but damaged. And the Unicode consortium decided to allow Egyptologists to use these shading characters. This is only a selection. There are more for this, and this solved two major problems that Egyptologists had with Unicode. So, yeah, real progress was made there, fortunately. And as I said. So the sign inventory in Unicode is based on proposals. But what are these proposals based on? Serge Rossmore-Duc said, well, we have a real lack of referenced sign lists. We have sign lists, but they are not backed up by attestations for these signs that prove that these characters exist, and where, well, you know, you have a scientific source. And for this, there are now several projects for Demotic, for Hieratic, and also for hieroglyphs. And the one for hieroglyphs is this Todd sign list. And they state on their About website that their first aim is to document the functions attested for individual signs in order to indicate which standardized character may be used in which context. And for the first time, we now have an online database that gives us a character. When there are graphic variants, those would also be displayed. Here, this is not the case. And then the different sign functions in the alphabetic writing system. So as a classifier, also called determinative or logogram or phonogram, here called phonemogram. And if you clicked on these arrows here, you would get the references, so screenshots of photographs of hieroglyphic text that prove that this character is used there in the sign function. And future Unicode proposals will be based on sign lists like that. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I have a cold. So, Franziska, if you could say a sentence until I can speak again.
Yes, of course. Something else that we want to show you is a very similar database, but for Demotic. So we are switching briefly to that. and I'm going on to where we have been briefly. And there is a tool called the Demotic Paleographical Database Project. And we go live into that because it's very similar to that sign list. The colleagues there have created a browser-based
Sorry,
list of
Franziska.
text.
So
Yes,
I think we have to share the screen or not.
it is
I don't
actually
see.
shared, but I'm trying again. Thank you.
Or Katie, can you? Okay.
Now it should work.
Okay.
It didn't work with the first
Now,
click.
wait a second. So yes. Okay. Yes. Great.
Yeah, now we should be on the front page of the Demotic Paleographical Database Project, which did something similar like this sign list but for demotic signs. What the colleagues have compiled here is that they first started with a corpus of text. This Jehuti database has a limited access right now. Only if you work with the colleagues you can access that, so I'm not going to show you that. But the corpus, and in that case, they came up with a couple of very diverse writings and different documents and literary text. I'm just randomly clicking on one, and what you then get is a document with metadata and information on the text, on the literature, also links if applicable. And then they have created a computerized font of Demotic, and something like that did exist in the 90s, but it's not working anymore, and there's been different tries with different fonts, but here they created a new font, and if you hover with it through your mouse, you get displayed the writings in this particular papyrus in that case, and you can also click on the different writings and words and signs, and you can get to their database as well. But I'm going back here. You have also transliteration and translation, in this case in German, of the text. And what you also have, if you go back, here is a paleography part where, and you have this quite often in a text, you encounter a sign and you don't know what it looks like. And there is this little window here where you have the circle and the stroke, and this is actually the writing for sesh, to write, document, scribe, and so on, and it displays your dot, but I delete this here by double clicking on it. And I think I saw a sign in a papyrus that looked a little bit like something like this or so. And then while you draw it, or maybe you work on it a little bit more, it comes up with suggestion. And then I'm like, no, this is not really what I'm looking for. Actually, my drawing was so bad. Let's try again and make this a little bit more what I think it looks like, and then you have these different options. And let's just think I wanted to draw or write an owl in Demotic. You can click on the sign that looks closest to what, and oh wait, they did this much better than I did. This looks like a 3 or so, and then you can actually go and see the attestations of the variants of that sign that they have in their corpus. Can go through it, click on it, and you also have a very nice timeline when this sign is attested. Here we have, of course, a very common sign that's attested for the full time that Demotic is attested as well, and very widely represented in the Nile Valley and in Egypt. So feel free to play with it. This is a really nice tool, and this project has done a lot of things right. In comparison also with other projects. And something else, when we talk about Demotic, I wanted to show you is the Demotic word list, or Demotische Wortliste. Once again, a German project, this time from the University of Munich. The Demotic Paleography project is hosted at the University of Heidelberg. And this one is something where you can actually look for the classifiers, for the determinatives, but you can also use it for translations or so. Even though the colleagues are not so happy, it's actually to look up certain classifiers. And this has also a new function. You could actually look for virtual words. So that means words that might be the successors or the predecessors of earlier writings, earlier than Demotic, like Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, or later ones, Coptic, where you can look for words that are not attested yet in Demotic, but there might have been predecessors or successors of these words. So that's what I wanted to show you from the Demotic side. And coming back and stop my screen sharing here.
Yeah, I think I'm fine to go again. Sorry about that. So let's jump back from Demotic to Unicode hieroglyphs. By the way, there is no representation for Demotic in Unicode yet. That's why we are not talking about it. Hopefully that will change one day, but so far there are still many problems to solve. What can you do when you finally can encode your language in Unicode? Well, for instance, you can Google for terms in that language. I hope you can see my Google window now. Here, you see that I get as a suggestion, I get an emoji. That's kind of offensive. Yes. Well, let's enter this very simple sequence of 2 hieroglyphic signs here and Google for them. And well, the first hit you get is the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae, at least when it's on my computer. You may have other Google results because that is a bit dependent on your search habits. Yeah, but so in theory, you can see that I also find an attestation here in one GitHub repository of an Egyptian text called the Eloquent Peasant, for instance, and then the Ancient Egyptian Dictionary, which is based on the TLA data and their GitHub repository, and so on. So I think in the future, we will see more hits for spellings. And this, well, since you have seen that the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae is the big player at the moment, brings me to showing you what this web interface actually provides for you. So let me go back to the start page here and switch to English. So what you can see there is a familiar screenshot if you know the version 1 of the web interface, the old TLA as we call it now. You recognize that image of the slip archive slips. And what kind of information do you get on the starting page? Well, first of all, you get the information about the version of the tool, so of the TLA as a web tool. It's version 2.21.1. You have the language menu here, English, German, and now, since I think November, you also have an Arabic interface. So, yeah, speaking of decolonization and the ethical issues that Franziska discussed when speaking about the Lincke Wendrich's paper, there is some progress here. And then there is some basic information about the corpus and the lemma list, and also as on every page of the web interface that you will see a preferred citation that you can use when you want to cite a particular page of the TLA. So of course we want to search. And this is the search interface, and you can see that it looks a bit different from the one of the old TLA, but it has very similar functions. You don't have to log in anymore, so that makes access a bit easier. And then you can just simply start searching. The lemma list, so the hieroglyphic, hieratic, so old, middle, and late Egyptian lemma list is still separated from the Demotic lemma list, and well, there will be links between the two, but you still search them individually, but you can click on both if you like. And then you can enter the transliteration, and you can do that in this manual decodage if you like. You have many little helper dialogues and windows like this one that gives you again the information how to type the respective transliteration characters when you use a normal English, German, whatever ASCII keyboard, or you can do it in Unicode, and then you can have a virtual keyboard for typing the transliteration, if you like. You can choose several filters, so word class, so part of speech, for instance, and for some of them, for instance, for names, no. Why is it called names and not nouns? Oh yeah, because it is names. So for proper names, for some of them, like for proper names, you also have subclasses. As you can see, you can even filter more. Or you can search for the root of a lemma, or also do a reverse search. So if you have a translation, you can try to find what the Egyptian term would be. You can search for a bibliographical reference, because in older literature you will often find a quotation like this, quoting the volume of the Wörterbuch der ägyptischen Sprache, and so on. And then I think something that many people missed in the new TLA when it went live was the possibility to search for collocates, so for lemmas appearing in close connection and close proximity to each other. That has now been implemented in this version of the new TLA as well, and it works like it used to. So you have to know the lemma ID, so this numerical code, and it is, well, operational like it used to be in the old TLA as well. And you can also search for any kind of ID. You will see these long and random, arbitrary, well, maybe not random, but arbitrary ID numbers. And whenever you find one like that in a quote and you want to look it up, you can enter it here in the TLA ID lookup. So let us search for something. For instance, this. So when you search, you of course get a list of results, and that shows you the lemmata that meet your query's conditions. So I had searched for names, and this is why I only get names here. And as a default, you will get the German translation here. But you can switch on the English or French or Arabic one if there is one now, of course, with proper names. That is not the case. What you can also switch on is the hieroglyphic spellings. Yeah, so you have the sidebar, excuse me, where you can do a lot of filtering. So you can switch on the hieroglyphic spellings if you want them. You can display the lemma ID, which makes it easy to quote that entry. You can switch on the word class or switch it off. So our word class here is personal name. If I switch it off, it disappears. You can display the attestation time if it has been entered, and also references to dictionaries. So in the case of proper names, that will be Ranke Personennamen in many cases. And on the top of this bar, you can also sort in alphabetical order, or also by attestation period. So I think that sorting by attestation period is a real blessing for people working on the later periods, because you can finally pull up the periods that interest you, and not start in the Old Kingdom every time. So I will go back one step and take away the filter here, because I want to find a common noun and not a proper noun. Yeah, so let's take this. Okay. So if you click on one of the results of the lemma search, you get to a lemma page, so a lemma detail page, where you get all the information that we have on this particular lemma. First of all, you get this ID that can be quoted as a reference. It is persistent. You can copy the spelling either in Unicode hieroglyphs or, if you prefer, in manual decodage, so in Gardner numbers. You get the information from which lemma list this entry is from, so either demotic or hieroglyphic and hieratic, what word class in the fine-grained word class ontology it is, and then you get the translation in all the languages that have already been entered. So for the main word classes, we will now have translation in all these 4 languages: German, English, French, and Arabic. For other word classes, like the titles and the proper names, you usually still only have the German one. Then you have the attestations. I come back to that in a second, but let's jump it for a moment. You have the attestation period according to the corpus of the TLA for this lemma. So in this case, it's quite a long time. You have the spellings that have already been entered in hieroglyphs in the corpus. This is in an experimental state or in a beta state. So if you find mistakes, please let the TLA members know. You have bibliographical references. You have links to other dictionary projects. So to the old TLA database that is still online in parallel, to the Karnak project and their lemma list, to the digital slip archive of the Berliner Wörterbuch, and to the Vega dictionary from Montpellier. And then you have information about the people who you should quote when you want to refer to the editors of this entry, and the list of elements that this lemma is related to. So subordinate lemmata and composites, and also, if known, the root. And then again, a citation information. So it is quite comprehensive, as you can see. Let's look at the occurrences. Depending on your interest, what you want to look at in detail, you again have the choice to switch on and switch off all kinds of different layers of annotations here. You can have the hieroglyphs displayed or not. I think usually you want to. And you can switch on the annotation block, and that is also quite comprehensive. So first of all, it is possible to copy the token ID of a token. So the TLA now has, I should have looked it up, like something like 1.5 million or so tokens in its corpus, and each of them has an ID that points directly to this one token in the whole corpus. And you can reference that by copying the ID. So for quoting text passages, this is just, it doesn't get better than this. So if you don't need that, just make it disappear. You can have the word class, so the part of speech, displayed or not, so preposition, verb, substantive, and so on. But you don't have to if that is not your center of interest. You can have the lemma translation that is, in this case, it is German. I think that cannot yet be switched to English, French, or Arabic, but I'm sure that in the future that will also be possible. If you don't need that word-by-word translation, make it disappear. You also have the grammatical tagging, because when they enter these texts, and that is something that you could never see in the old TLA, they also enter a kind of grammar/syntax code that is idiosyncratic, but it can provide important information, for instance, that this is a participle. And that it's an active participle from a germinating. Do you say germinating in English or geminating? I don't even know. In singular masculinum. Yeah, if you are interested in participles, that's nice to see that here. If you don't want to see it, click it away. And then the linguistic glossing, that is something for the people who work in linguistic typology and who talk to people who don't read Egyptian. The Leipzig glossing rules are the way to go when you talk to other linguists about languages and their morphology. And this is the encoding for Egyptian that you can have displayed here. And you can even switch on and off the translation or the dating that you see here, or the information who edited this text. And you can also, you can also sort your attestations if you need. So again, if you are interested in the latest text, go by dating time span start descending, and it will give you the latest attestations first. Then you should switch on the dating again. Okay, so this verb is attested. The latest attestations entered into the corpus are from the reign of Augustus. So first century. So this is the way that you can use the TLA when you want to use it like a dictionary and then look up the references. But you can also go by text and text corpus. This is also fairly new, only a couple of months old, I believe, when you go here to text corpus and then object text hierarchy. You get this list, and unfortunately it's in German, I think, because this metadata has not yet been entered in English. And you see the different subcorpora of the TLA. Often they correspond to text genres, but not always. And you can then search for the ones that you are interested in. So for instance, letters. And then if you read German, you see that this is a chronological order from Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom to New Kingdom and later. And then, you know, you have this hierarchy, and people are used to that from the old TLA, who also provided this access, not through the lemmata, but through the text called Gliederungshierarchie der ägyptischen Texte. And when you have found the text that you are looking for, you can access the metadata page of this text. The text also has a unique ID that you can quote and people can come back to, and you can display all the sentences in context. So you see, not everything is already perfectly translated into English, but I'm sure that you will find your way around this. Yes, so I think it's possible to talk about the TLA for hours, but I don't want to do that now. And if you have questions, we can come back to that in the discussion, of course. What I wanted to point out is that there have recently been some major updates. So in November last year, and then in February, a minor one. And if you want to stay up to date and see what they have recently done and what they are planning to do next, you can find the information on the development page. So I have a list of things that have been added recently, like the Arabic interface, for instance, and also this text object hierarchy. And I would like to point out one more thing, namely that the Thesaurus Linguae Aegyptiae, with its lemma list, is now going for linked and open data. For instance, they have recently established an API, so an application programming interface, following the standards of the National German Research Infrastructure Initiative and the consortium called Text Plus has set certain standards, and this API follows these standards, and it will be possible to use better search engines for lemmata and dictionaries to access the TLA data through that. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm coughing so much. And also at the end of the last year, the TLEA has uploaded its complete lemma list to Wikidata. So you can now, use this largest linked open data platform and find the complete Egyptian vocabulary there. But I think I need a break from speaking again, sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eliese. So this is basically what we wanted. What our most important part for today is to show you these major achievements of the TLA. And for the end of the session, we have, just a few final things for you to show concerning the Rosetta Stone and large language models. And let's go for this last little step here. And I'm also sharing my screen. And come back to our slide. One thing that Eliese also has mentioned is that a lot of projects are also using the TLA data these days, and also refer to the project itself. I'm now very sorry that the slide share is working. Let me see. Just trying to make that work. So we produced a list for you where you can look up a couple of projects making use of that data. So feel free to check it out and get back to us if you have any questions. What we have already talked about is the demotic word list and the demotic paleography database. So that's a quick repetition here. And one final thing that we have prepared for you today is the topic of text alignment. So this is something that maybe an update of the TLA in the further future will cover, but at least technically it might be possible to have extra layers to have also text alignment. And speaking of text alignment, we would like to refer also to the session from last week from Megan Bushnell, Chiara Palladino, and Farnoosh Shamsian, who did a session on text alignment. So we are not going into detail here what text alignment is, but of course mention briefly that it's great for learning languages, but also as a research tool to do statistical things. And also in Egyptology, we have made use of text alignment. There is the Alpheus translation alignment editor that is within the Perseus family, but there's also Ugarit. That's something that's been covered in detail in the session last week. That's why we are not going to explain about that as well. But we have still a few bullet points if you're keen. And there's also a tool called Ducat, the daughter of Ugarit, which is a citation alignment tool, which is actually Ugarit, but with the links to the actual to the sources, with the alignment between the citable passages of a text. That's also been covered in an earlier session of Sunoikisis. So there we do have the links, and we have been interested in that, especially when we worked, Eliese and I, both on our two projects that we have on the Rosetta Stone. And this is a world premiere today that we are going to show you both projects in one session. I'm just starting with the Leipzig part of it, not going into history, but you might remember 2 years ago, it was the big event that we celebrated 200 years of the decipherment of Egyptian. There were a couple of exhibitions all over the world, lots of publications and online publications as well. And of course, we were part of that too. But our project in Leipzig was stemming from Monica Berti's project, who's with us today, who was working also with the Greek version of the Rosetta Stone, and we teamed up together to make a digital edition of the full version, because the Rosetta Stone has 3 versions of the same text. And we also teamed up with the colleagues from the University of Florida, from the Digital Epigraphy and Archaeology project, because we had to create for our purposes new high-resolution photographs, also in 3D. And this is what it looked like when the team of us were flying to London in 2018. And there we created, with a technology called shape from shading, with light coming from 4 directions, new photographs and new fully 3D photographs that are also released online, so you can download them. And we will also release a couple of more material in the next month. So, but not going into detail here. There is references if you're keen to research a little bit more on that. But you can definitely see on the right-hand side of the slide that we have a couple of improvements, and also that helped colleagues, for instance, at the TLA when they were adding new versions of the Rosetta Stone and similar texts, decrees, so legal texts, to help a little bit with the readings on problematic passages. Right. And what alignment in Ugarit in this case is actually great is aligning the 3 versions of the text, and that we can see on the screenshot of this slide. We have Hieroglyphic Egyptian, the Demotic Egyptian version, and the Greek version. And I am now not in the live system here, but if you hover through it, you can see which word corresponds to which word, which present to which expression in the other language. So, and then you can see there's different vocabulary compared from Hieroglyphic Egyptian, Middle Egyptian in that case, and Demotic Egyptian, and to which Greek word it corresponds. And we also have, when we look at this in detail, and this is research that Josephine Hensel has been doing, that there is in result no Rosetta decree in 3 languages, but rather the decree contains 3 rather free translations of the same content. Usually we think that the Greek version was first and was developed very close in close ties with the Demotic, because that was the spoken and written language in Egypt at the time itself. We do have one-to-one translations, but we also have omissions, a couple of rare editions. Some of them are actually uncertain, because this is very often in passages where the text is breaking off, where we do have, because we don't have the full decree transmitted to us. The Rosetta Stone has this odd shape because there's stuff missing in lines. And also changes of sequence, mostly with nouns, and also in some cases there might be some glitches or mistakes, and these lead to rather elaborated or elliptic passages. So there's a lot of potential for further research using text alignment, as we have done here. We also visualize that, and with that, I am going on to the live demo on the website. The links are also on one of our next pages. Quickly switching to the browser and hope you are all still with me. I guess so. So we do have on the Digital Rosetta Stone project website an alignment where you can hover with your mouse and you can see the different attestations in the areas of our high resolution photograph. And if you stop by, you can see the transliteration in Unicode of Egyptian, not Demotic Unicode, and also not hieroglyphic Unicode here, but we're going to implement it as soon as the signs will be available. Not all of them are available yet. Eliese mentioned that. And if you click on it, you'll get through the Ugarit and can have a closer look, actually, what has been done and what has been added. Switching back to the presentation, if you want to know more about a project, there's an online exhibition in English and German, and we've also done a TED Talk that's been that has subtitles in many languages, I think in more than 40 languages or so. Feel free to check this out as well, and stay tuned for the release of the photos, the 3D data, and this might be something for another version, another class of Sunoikisis, for the demotic tree banking, where we also are in terms of finishing that. And as I said, world premiere, 2 Rosetta Stone projects. So you've seen the one. There is the Leipzig project. It also has a new website. Just showing you this briefly as well. This is that one where Monica Berti and I will be working in the future as well. Feel free to check it out. And we also want to highlight here the Berlin project. This is this one, Rosetta Stone hieroglyphic text.net. And with that, I hand over to Eliese again.
Yes, thank you. Wait, now I have to find the right slide. Here it is. Yeah. So you hear how enthusiastically Franziska is speaking about this project. I must say I feel the same about the digital Rosetta Stone projects, because the Berlin one was my very first DH project. And I think very much like the Leipzig one, it was a teaching project. I think you have not mentioned that, Franziska, but
Yes.
you did that with students, right? And in Berlin, we did that too. And it was in 2014 in our case, so quite a long time ago. And it's one of the starting points for getting into the digital stuff for me. And our idea at the time was that we had been working with typological linguists in the Topoi project, speaking about how languages encode topological spatial information. And we just couldn't believe that this most famous inscribed object from ancient Egypt is not accessible to linguists, because there is no annotated version with interlinear morphemic glossing for linguists. So we decided to make one with the students and in digital form, and called it the Rosetta Stone Online. And the website is still online, and our idea was to have the 3 versions with rich annotations. So an analysis of the spelling, and here we adapted what Assyriology is doing for cuneiform. So when it's in capital letters, it means it's a logogram, and when it's in lowercase letters, it's phonogram. And we also marked whether the word has a classifier or not, so a determinative. And we have then all kinds of annotation layers, of course, the transliteration. Then the transliteration adapted to the syntax of the Leipzig glossing rules, the interlinear morphemic glossing. So that's what matters to the linguist. And then a word-by-word translation into English and German, and a running translation done by experts of the text. And then, very much like in Franziska's and Monica's project, we have this HTML image map, and you click on it and you get to, if it works, it's a bit slow, and you get to the aligned segments. So our alignment was not done on token level like in the Leipzig projects. And I applaud you that you managed to do that, because we were sometimes struggling just to get paragraphs or sentences aligned, because the versions are so different. They are like complete sentences in the Demotic version that are not extant in Greek and not preserved in Ptolemaic. And I can only I would sign to the fact that this is not a translation from the Greek, but that there's much more variation. So this is why ours looks a bit like a text desert, as you say in German, Textwüste, because the purpose was this linguistic markup, and this is what we managed to do in one term. And I hope that with the development of the past 10 years, we will return to it and actually continue to work on this material, hopefully also with the great new image material that the Leipzig project collected.
Right, fantastic. And now we still have the bonus track. And the bonus is the large language model of Claude. Yeah.
Yes, right. Everyone is talking about these large language models and also neural machine translation. And some colleagues that are more experimental than I am, maybe, have dared to experiment with that for English. And of course, it is So Miyagawa from Tsukuba University in Japan. Hi, So, if you are watching this. And he has recently created a tool that he calls Tot AI Teacher, which you can see in this slide. And I now switch to the live version. And that is the large language model called Claude in the background, paired with retrieval, what is it called? Retrieval, augmentation, generative AI. So it searches databases in the background. And the databases in that case is the Comprehensive Coptic Lexicon for Coptic. and a digitized electronic version of the Fortner Dictionary of Middle Egyptian English. And in theory, you can have it translate or analyze Egyptian sentences for you. Wait, where's the window? I will reload the page. I don't see the window where you enter your question. Okay, here. So the other day we had tried a bit, as you can see. So I have asked it, can you transcribe and translate this word? And I used the word that I showed you earlier in the Google search. And it says, well, I have not been instructed to input or receive Egyptian hieroglyphic Unicode. So, well, it's still limited. So I will ask it something easier. How can I say my name is Eliese in Middle Egyptian? Yeah. Renipu Eliese, okay, so he does not even suggest a transliteration for my name, probably because it contains so many vowels, and that's kind of a problem. I think I would have left out the poo if I had constructed the sentence, but yes, you can live with it. And then, because it was also trained of Coptic, it makes immediately a suggestion also for Sahidic Coptic, Paranpe, Eliese, and for the Bohairic version with capital letters. I don't know why. So yeah, it works. Do not try to do your Egyptological homework with this. It's not good enough for this. It's only the beginning of this new adventure with generative AI in Egyptology. But it's yeah, could have been worse, I must say. So
All right, yeah, give it a try.
yes,
And you don't need Egyptologist friends now for displaying your things in Egyptian or so.
Yeah, and there's a second one that we have linked for you, the Coptic translator that was created by two colleagues, I think, from Canada, where you can have English or German or Arabic translated into either Sahidic or Bohairic. And I think the closer your language is to a biblical style, the better the translation will be. That is not based on a large language model, as far as I know, but also on neural networks. So, yeah.
Yeah. And with that, we are coming back. We have two exercises also for this class. One is researching something in the TLA, trying to make you familiar with this tool. And another one is from the Rosetta Stone project. Yeah, this is what we wanted to cover in today's session. It's been a rich and long session, and now we're looking forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you both so much for that brilliant overview of so many different things to do with digital Egyptology. So for students watching wanting to do the exercise, obviously for those of you in London following along this series, it's a little bit out of sequence, but we will have a chance to talk about that next week if you want to have a go at it. The two exercises there, and the second one with the digital Rosetta Stone very nicely follows on from the translation alignment last week's session, as Franziska and Eliese already mentioned. If you are watching live and do have any questions, please do put them in the comments. Now. Yeah, otherwise the only comment that I have for Franziska and Eliese is that it really seems that there's been a huge amount of progress in digital Egyptology over just the past couple of years. That the new version of the TLA and the Unicode standardization are both huge things to have happened that really show it's a very sort of a very fast-moving discipline.
Yes, and in particular when it comes to machine learning. Like last year, there was this first workshop on machine learning for ancient languages in one of the conferences of the Association of Computational Linguistics. And I think it had 6 submissions from Egyptology, and that was the first. So it's like kind of all of a sudden it explodes. I feel that Egyptology is a bit late to the game, but it's now coming, like really. Yeah, and you see the many references that we have given. I now realize that I forgot one, the first paper on trying to automatically detect or to annotate classifiers in Egyptian. I should add that too. So yes, especially in machine learning, neural network-based machine learning, things are going on. What we have not talked about at all is optical character recognition. There are also at least 6-7 papers dealing with that. I think the first one from 2013, and then everyone working with that same data set. I'm not convinced that there is an application with that particular data set in Egyptology, but people are trying what could work with this very complex material, and I hope there will be breakthroughs also in this, because typing the hieroglyphs, it's just... I mean, some people enjoy it. I find it tedious.
Yeah, it's a very tedious task. I definitely agree with that. Even typing the transliteration can sometimes be tedious if you have an H with a hook under it or so. Sometimes you need to combine different parts. Yeah, so it's definitely not as easy as it is for Greek and Latin, which are alphabetic languages. It's much harder for Egyptian, but also Maya, which Eliese mentioned, and also cuneiform that you are working with, Katie. And there's also been a breakthrough, but that is a completely different technology where you also have to take into consideration the depth of the sign. So it's more a 3D character to it. Yeah, so OCR will still take a while, but if we can decipher further papyri that have been unreadable so far, think of the so-called Vesuvius challenge. So we are quite happy that at some point we also get further with that. And what I also find a really nice progress is this Demotic paleography database, where you can just draw something or write something. And then it helps you with suggestions. So I think this is, for some people, a real game changer.
No.
Can I add a comment? Because as Eliese was saying, there was an explosion. There is an explosion now, but in general for historical language, and not only for Egyptian, there was a lot of work in the past decades, because now, of course, we have the possibility to use also a chatbot thanks to the work of Soumya Gava, but still a lot of work was done, and still a lot has to be done. And I think that this session is important in general for our students, also for students who are not learning ancient Egyptian, because we have the question of representing historical writing systems, which is, I think, very, very interesting, because we have seen here, so for example, for Egyptian, we use these transliteration transcriptions, depending also on the technology of the book. That was the convention. And today, of course, we have more possibilities, but still we have to be very careful how we preserve the writing coding, because maybe, and this is what we see with the ancient Greek, the text looks like correct on a page on the HTML on a website, but then behind the code maybe is not so correct, or is not consistent. And you show that with the transcription also when you use ASCII characters. So we have these interesting and complex problems. And of course, also for classical languages, by which I mean ancient Greek and Latin. For example, for Greek, we can't still represent archaic dialects, because we can only represent classical Greek. But of course, as Egyptologists always tell us, well, you have only very few letters, as Franziska was saying. Yes, it's true. But nevertheless, we still have problems for example, for archaic dialects, but definitely with Egyptian, there are many complexities. And one thing, you showed, Eliese, a page with a lemma, and the lemma is attested, and I think that the time range was more than 1,000 years. So you if you consider the chronological span, you immediately understand the complexities in terms of languages and writing systems. So this is very fascinating, but super complex. So this session, I think, is interesting for our students. So also, I'm saying that also for classicists or students of other historical languages. So the message here is how to preserve writing systems. Now we have so many possibilities. Egyptian is an excellent test case for the complexities, but again, be careful. So about the way we encode, and of course we should sit together as humanists and try to find an agreement. I know it's impossible, it's very difficult, but at least to find a compromise to begin to move on and preserve data. But I think there is a question in the chat. Yes, I see by Lorelei.
Lorelei.
Yes.
Hello.
The Coptic Scriptorium project. Yes.
Yes. So, is there a way to link the lemma lists? Yes. I must say I should have asked the colleagues at the TLA. I think it has not yet been done by the TLA, but it's definitely on the list of things they will do because of the diachronic development that we want to see, and we want to be able to trace the lemmata through the different language stages that is in different lemma lists. But I think that the Demotic Paleography database project has indirectly done that, because I think they have links to Coptic Scriptorium and to the TLA. So it is like kind of indirectly done actually already, and maybe one can leverage that data that they have produced by doing that.
Yeah. And ANNIS is also a platform for visualizing annotations developed in Berlin. So I'm sure that
yes, we have left out the Coptic resources of our presentation completely. I think they deserve their own session, or probably had in the past, right? So yes, so the Coptic Scriptorium material is great, and there are a lot of talks on YouTube that you can watch where they present their work, Caroline Schroeder and Amir Zeldes.
Yes, exactly. And I remember the beginning where nothing was extant more than 10 years ago, as you also mentioned, Eliese. So we have to say that in general, of course, DJH is not so new, but it's true, in the last decade, many things happened. And of course, at the time, we were discussing these complexities, and then step by step, for example, with Unicode, is interesting to see that they are, ingesting our needs, our requests. And so things are moving on.
But with Unicode, what I heard from people who actually wrote Unicode proposals and tried to get them implemented, it's a process of several years, and you really have to be consistent. You have to reply to a lot of emails. You have to go to a lot of online sessions and make your case. It is a lot of work that stands behind this progress.
Well, but if you also, for our students, if you access the website of Unicode, and there is a list of the writing systems that they represent, which is basically every possible writing system, including historical writing systems and contemporary ones, you get a sense. So there are so many charts, and of course dead languages maybe are, not on the priority list, but still things are happening. And in 10 years, I think that we should be optimistic, I think. But it's true, a lot of work has to be done.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can already see the progress when, I mean, Monica and I, we started including, and also Gabi Boda, Egyptology into Sunoikisis in 2017. So it's a while now. And from time to time, I've been reporting on this progress, and we can already see what has been happening in the last years from proposal to proposal. And there was a gap in between. And now things are, yeah, out there to get going. And it's quite, what a time to be alive.
Yes. Yeah, especially the neural networks. I mean, that is quite something for the automation.
Yes, but this is again where we need to produce data. So we have this responsibility, I think.
Yes.
Now it's a time, of course, this is something that we know, but sometimes we forget that we have this responsibility to preserve the heritage that was transmitted to us. Of course, we know that, but now we have this, okay, we are going through the digital, which is one of the possible technologies of human beings. I mean, we already had in the past other technologies, and now we have this technology. In the future, in the distant future, we will have maybe another technology. And so that's the thing. So, and definitely, again, how can we represent these writing systems and how we depend on the technology. Again, another thing we forget, the technology of the printed book, which was and still is a super advanced technology, of course, developed conventions and methods. Now we have other possibilities, but again, we have to rethink, because the problem is this: we have to transfer into the digital ancient sources, ancient texts, but also the work done by scholars over the centuries, including transcriptions, transliterations, not to speak of translations. So we always have these different layers, ancient sources and the work done on these sources. Of course. So this is the complex part, especially when also CR, we can OCR ancient Egyptian, but also modern critical editions of ancient Egyptian text, where we have still complexities, and we know that the layout of a page with a critical edition of a text, including the critical apparatus, also for inscriptions, including Egyptian text, is complex for the machine. The first thing that we have to train the machine to understand, to recognize the layout, etc. So we know these things, but anyway, so things are happening. Okay, so
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Franziska and Eliese, for joining us today for this session. Even a little bit outside of our usual schedule, our students will definitely be so happy that they finally get to hear this session. So thank you so much for joining us. The final session of the Sunoikisis Spring Series will be this Thursday, the 20th of March, on papyrological texts and linguistic research. So do join us then. And thank you very much for watching.
Thanks for having
everyone.
us.